This is Limelight America. Here's your host, Michael Drew Shaw.
Thank you, Lynette, and welcome to Limelight America, where we present one-on-one personal conversations with interesting people from all walks of life. These up-close encounters with people of the fascinating and inspiring kind include business, entertainment, sports, and artistic entrepreneurs, scholars, role models, and philanthropists who impact the quality of life for us all. Entrepreneurs are known for their perseverance, but what do you do when a law prohibiting your business is passed? Adolf Coors was a brewer's apprentice in Germany before immigrating to America in 1868. In 1914, Coors' own town of Golden, Colorado voted to ban alcoholic beverages. The brewmaster responded to the threat of national prohibition by simply changing a few ingredients. Though he never lived to see its repeal, Adolf Coors kept his business alive during Prohibition by making malted milk, a product that utilized the manufacturing capabilities he already had. In 1933, the Coors family went back to doing what it did best.
Sell good merchandise at a reasonable profit. Treat your customers like human beings, and they will always come back for more. Leon L. Bean.
Leon Wood Bean, known to his friends and loyal customers simply as LL. He never intended to become a mail-order giant. All he really wanted to do was keep his feet dry. But there were much bigger plans in his future. Like many entrepreneurs, Bean's early business pursuits were less than stellar. He'd achieved little success in various ventures, ranging from selling soap to working in a creamery. But his unremarkable career began to change when he invented a unique product that would make him famous and become the cornerstone of one of the world's largest international mail-order companies. According to legend, in 1911, while managing his brother Irvin's store in Freeport, Maine, the avid outdoorsman decided he was tired of getting his feet soaked while hunting deer in the boggy hinterlands of Maine. In a flash of inspiration, he hit on the notion of sewing lightweight, comfortable leather uppers to the rubber bottoms of ordinary galoshes. Not much of a craftsman himself, Bean had a local cobbler make him a pair of boots based on his design. Testing them on his next hunting trip, the Maine hunting shoes, as he would later dub them, kept his feet so dry, Bean was convinced they were his ticket to financial success. He had 100 pairs made and set out to try selling them through the mail. While the idea for the shoe was brilliant in itself, Bean's choice of a target market was sheer genius. From his experience working retail, Bean knew that out-of-towners who came to Maine to hunt and fish were very wary about showing up with the wrong equipment. Working out of the basement of his brother's store, Bean put together a mailing list of people who held non-resident Maine hunting licenses and sent out flyers advertising his new boots. The flyers read, "Outside your gun, nothing is so important to your outfit as your footwear. You can't expect success hunting deer or moose if your feet are not properly dressed." The Maine hunting shoe is designed by a hunter who has tramped the Maine woods for the past 18 years. They are light as a pair of moccasins with the protection of heavy hunting boots. Bean's distinctive, folksy prose, which gave the impression that he was an expert outdoorsman offering friendly advice to naive tenderfoots, became one of the company's trademarks and would later influence such catalogs as Eddie Bauer and Land's End. Unfortunately, Bean's claims about the quality of his shoes would prove to be somewhat exaggerated. Although all 100 pairs sold, the shoes turned out to be a flop. The stitching that had held the leather tops pulled out of the soft rubber soles, and almost as quickly as the shoes had sold, 90 pairs were returned. Many would have considered this a disaster and given up. But for Bean, it turned out to be a watershed event that led him to formulate the customer service policy his company remains famous for today. Bean promptly refunded everyone's money. But he didn't stop there. Undaunted by this initial failure, he convinced U.S. Rubber to mold a heavier bottom that would hold the stitching, then replaced each defective pair with the improved version, free of charge. turning 90 angry customers into 90 potential future customers impressed with Bean's honesty. With a new, improved product to sell, Bean set out more flyers, and once again the orders poured in. Inspired by his success, Bean extended his product line to include other types of hunting and camping gear. A true hands-on entrepreneur, Bean personally field-tested every product he sold. He would often sneak out of the office for an afternoon of fishing and product testing. Bean also wrote his own advertising copy and personally replied to customer letters, giving his catalog a distinctive personality and further cultivating the image of an odd but honest Yankee merchant who truly cared about quality and customer satisfaction. When you bought from L.L. Bean, you weren't buying from some faceless company. You were ordering from a real person who had your best interest at heart. As John Scow puts it in a 1985 Sports Illustrated article, it's as if Bean were family, some sort of mildly eccentric but amiable uncle who lives up in Maine and sends us packages. Bean's sales figures increased at such a rapid rate that in 1917 he was able to move his operation from the basement of his brother's store and open a retail store of his own, which still stands today. By 1924, he had 25 people working for him and yearly sales of $135,000. 13 years and one depression later, sales had passed the 1 million mark. While the Maine hunting shoe remained the centerpiece of both the store and the catalog, Bean continually added new products, ranging from Hudson Bay point blankets to zippered duffel bags. But no matter how many new products Bean added, one thing never changed: the unconditional guarantee. At any time, for any reason, customers could return any L.L. Bean product for a replacement or full refund. And it truly was, and still is, a full refund. Unlike many catalogs which refund the product price but not shipping and handling charges, Bean never charged for shipping. He was insistent on this. He seemed to instinctively know that what he was really selling was the absolute, unqualified reliability of L.L. Bean and his 100% satisfaction guarantee. As satisfied customers shared with their friends stories about L.L. Bean fixing the tips of fishing rods broken off in car doors, resoling camp shoes, or replacing compasses smashed during rafting trips, all free of charge, the company gained priceless word-of-mouth advertising and a customer base whose loyalty bordered on fanaticism. By the 1940s, L.L. Bean had firmly established a national reputation for quality and honesty and was visited regularly by political leaders, sports figures, and other celebrities, as well as thousands of satisfied customers. Bean was, and still is, so popular that his rustic Freeport store, decorated with a stuffed moose and a trout pond, is Maine's second largest tourist attraction, drawing more than 3.5 million visitors every year. Bean remained at the helm of the company until his death in 1967, when his grandson, Leon A. Gorman, took over as president. Today, nearly 90 years after Bean sold his first pair of Maine hunting shoes, L.L. Bean Incorporated has grown into one of the world's leading international mail-order companies, boasting sales of more than $1.2 billion per year and more than 4.5 million customers worldwide.
You're listening to Limelight America.
On Fire with Ignorance. Don't let the title fool you. The appropriate subtitle is Ignorance is Bliss, and it can be a helpful state of mind for an entrepreneur. If you don't know you can fail, or if you refuse to believe it, getting up every day with a positive attitude becomes a lot easier. Getting up off the mat after a knockdown becomes easier. Starting off with another new idea after you finally had to walk away from the last one for whatever reason, well, that becomes easier too. I used to resent people who had money to start with, but that was just a convenient excuse. The rich kids have as much right to claim they're entrepreneurs as I do. But the reality is that money trumps just about everything else in life, so a great idea with some cash behind it has a lot better chance of seeing the light of day than a brainstorm looking for an angel to invest. And yes, you will probably end up losing the majority of ownership of your idea if you're lucky enough to find an angel or angels, but it's better to have a piece of something than 100% of nothing. Just get over it and accept it as part of the bargain. Being an entrepreneur became fashionable in the 1980s. By the end of the decade, the word itself was big business. It was trumpeted in publications, on websites, by inspirational speakers, even in apparel. Then came intrapreneur. That was the term for corporate thinkers, thinking out of the box while on the company clock. It was all very cool, very hip, and very misleading. Many of the world's self-proclaimed entrepreneurs are flashes in the pan that occasionally make a fast buck but have no staying power. Then there are those who give up when the going gets tough and, tail between their legs, they go back to the grind. It really is easier, to just work for somebody and take the check. Historically, the economy periodically throws a curveball to the worker bees, many of whom are then forced to become entrepreneurs, or at least give it a shot. A few have succeeded and wish they hadn't wasted so much of their working lives working for the man. Far more who find themselves on the street after being thrown under the bus haven't the slightest idea what to do next. These are the former bankers, bakers, and candlestick makers who end up working at the drive-thru or rounding up grocery carts in the parking lot. It's terrifying to experience, and it's heartbreaking to watch. Dreamers and entrepreneurs are not synonymous. A dreamer just dreams, but a real entrepreneur does something about the dream. And not all entrepreneurs are geek founders of software companies or pitchmen turned big box store CEOs. Musicians, filmmakers, wrench monkeys, beauticians, 12-year-olds, retirees, farmers, little league coaches, and soccer moms, they can all be entrepreneurs. All it takes is an idea and a never-give-up attitude. Entrepreneurs believe they are either blessed or cursed, mostly the former. An entrepreneur can often be seen late at night, sitting alone at the kitchen table staring at an imaginary half glass of water, thinking, it really is half full and not half empty. Entrepreneurship can be a lonely and frustrating choice. It can make you paranoid as you worry about somebody else beating you to the punch, and you lose sleep wondering if you're on the money or out of your mind. I believe it's better to be approximately right than precisely wrong. So, if you're satisfied you've done your homework, go ahead and jump into the deep end and get on with it. But hey, I'm not trying to convince anyone to be an entrepreneur. I'm just telling you what I think being an entrepreneur is all about. It's not knowing any better, or choosing not to, because life is more exciting that way. Being on fire with ignorance is a way of saying, damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead. And honestly, I'd rather die trying than live without ambition. A full-blooded entrepreneur is someone who is willing to take huge risks, someone willing to run down 1,000 blind alleys and knock on 1,000 doors trying to sell new ideas that only they fully understand and believe in. Visions no one else can clearly see at first, if ever. Entrepreneurs are willing to work tirelessly in pursuit of a dollar, knowing deep down inside that it's not just the money that makes them want to get out of bed in the morning. Money is just a measuring stick after all. It's doing something nobody has ever done before that keeps an entrepreneur going. It's the challenge that excites you. It's the chase that turns you on. And the possibility that you are right is what fans the flame of your passion. So it all comes down to hoping and praying and crying and then being determined enough and angry enough, and yes, ignorant enough, to do it again and again until you achieve your goal. But if you chase a dream and it doesn't work out, don't think of it as a failure. Think of it as a successful attempt. The satisfaction of knowing you gave it everything you had will be the reward. Plus, no one will ever be able to accuse you of not trying.
You're listening to Limelight America
Two brothers left New Hampshire for Hollywood in 1928 with dreams of becoming actors. 20 years later, they were running a lunch counter in San Bernardino serving burgers to go. A former big band piano player, who was then working as a restaurant supply salesman, talked to the brothers and convinced them to let him sell franchises under their name. In 1961, Ray Kroc, the piano player and entrepreneur, bought out the McDonald's brothers for just under $3 million. Now that seems small compared to the company's success, but Richard McDonald was quoted in 1983 as saying, "Well, at the time, we didn't know if the 15-cent hamburger was just a passing fad. Personally, I have no regrets." James Dole graduated from Harvard and moved to Hawaii in 1899, intending to make his fortune raising pineapples. The young Ivy Leaguer got nothing but patronizing smiles from island farmers who had been trying to export the tropical fruit for years, but it spoiled too quickly to withstand the journey to markets on the mainland. Dole had an idea, but the farmers remained skeptical. Over the next 3 years, Dole and a small group of locals built a factory by hand. It was a cannery. Dole's answer to the spoilage problem was shipping the fruit in cans rather than in its fresh form. Pineapple grew to be one of Hawaii's largest industries, second only to tourism.
Nobody creates a fad, it just happens. People love going along with the idea of a beautiful pig. It's like a conspiracy. Jim Henson.
Jim Henson can be credited with many accomplishments. A brilliant innovator, he stretched the capabilities of advancing technology to adapt the ancient art of puppetry to the modern medium of television, transforming both in the process. As a preeminent popular artist, he contributed a lovable collection of endearing and enchanting characters to the diverse visual vocabulary of the 20th century. But perhaps his greatest accomplishment was the delight and wonder he brought to children and adults alike, championing the qualities of fancifulness, warmth, and consideration in an often coarse and cynical age. Jim Henson began his television career in 1954 while still a high school student. Hearing that The Morning Show, a local Washington, D.C. program, was looking for a puppeteer, he fashioned a crude puppet out of his mother's old green coat and a couple of ping-pong balls and landed the job. The following year, as a freshman at the University of Maryland, he was given his own twice-daily 5-minute TV show called Sam and His Friends. Realizing that traditional solid-head puppets wouldn't translate well to television, Henson, with the help of fellow classmate Jane, who he would later marry, invented a new type of puppet that could be more expressive. Dubbed Muppets, which according to one story came from combining the words puppets and marionette, Henson's puppets featured extremely wide, overbiting mouths and flexible arms that could be moved by rods. Made of foam rubber and covered with fleece, wool, flannel, or other soft material, the Muppets were pliable, so their faces could be manipulated to imitate human facial expressions. In addition to the Muppets, the show also introduced many of what would become Henson trademarks: music, off-the-wall humor, and technical tricks. At the time, Henson doubted that anyone really watched his show, but he couldn't have been more wrong. In 1958, he won an Emmy for Best Local Entertainment Show. The success of Sam and His Friends led to guest appearances on such national network programs as The Steve Allen Show, The Jack Paar Show, and The Ed Sullivan Show. Henson also began making commercials for sponsors throughout the country. To help out, Jim and Jane brought on puppeteer and writer Jerry Jewell in 1961. By 1963, increasing demand for national television appearances and an ever-growing list of commercial clients prompted Henson to seek out the talents of master puppet builder Don Salin and a young puppeteer named Frank Oz. The trio worked to develop the first nationally known Muppet character, Rolf the dog, who appeared regularly on The Jimmy Dean Show from 1963 to 1966. Impressed by Henson's ability to create short, funny puppet skits, In 1969, public television show producer Joan Gans Cooney asked him to create a family of characters to populate her new children's show, Sesame Street. Henson hesitated to accept Cooney's offer because he didn't want to be pigeonholed as a children's entertainer, but he eventually agreed. While Henson was always careful never to take credit for the achievements of Sesame Street, the show itself was the creation of the Children's Television Workshop, few would dispute that it was primarily Kermit the Frog, Bert and Ernie, Big Bird, Grover, and the other Muppets who made Sesame Street so captivating. Even Cooney herself once remarked that while CTW had a collective genius, Henson was the only individual genius. He was our era's Charlie Chaplin, Mae West, W.C. Fields, and Marx Brothers all rolled into one, she says. And indeed, he drew from all of them to create a new art form that influenced popular culture around the world. During its 30 years on the air, Sesame Street has been shown in countless countries, and Henson's Muppets have entranced hundreds of millions of children. In fact, given the number of his fans and the intensity of their devotion, Kermit the Frog may possibly be the most popular children's character of the century, eclipsing even Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse. Based on the popularity of Sesame Street, Henson began developing his own program, The Muppet Show. But despite the Muppets' success on Sesame Street and their proven appeal to both adults and children, Henson was unable to convince any major U.S. network to carry it. Even with its more sophisticated satire and wit, network executives still felt The Muppet Show was too child-oriented. Finally, in 1975, British impresario Sir Lew Grade offered Henson the chance to bypass the networks and join forces with his internationally syndicated ACC group. Sir Lew even promised Henson complete artistic control over 24 shows per year. It was an offer Henson just couldn't pass up. As part of ACC, Henson would get the financial backing he needed to produce the show, yet still have the freedom to offer it to network affiliates as a syndicated program. Starring such unforgettable characters as Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Gonzo the Great, Rizzo the Rat, Statler and Waldorf, and of course, Kermit the Frog, The Muppet Show was an instant hit. At its peak, it drew a weekly audience of more than 235 million viewers. People were watching around the world, and some of the biggest names in show business vied for guest appearances. The show's list of guest stars read like a who's who of Hollywood, boasting celebrities such as Bob Hope, Orson Welles, Telly Savalas, Dean Martin, Dinah Shore, Raquel Welch, Brooke Shields, Steve Martin, John Denver, and Rudolph Nureyev, who danced Swine Lake with Miss Piggy. One of the reasons for Henson's sustained appeal was his refusal to stick with the status quo. Once something showed the slightest trace of stagnation, he immediately dropped or revamped it. And true to form, when he felt The Muppet Show itself was growing stale, he promptly ended it in 1981 after a 5-year run. With The Muppet Show behind him, Henson took his creations to the big screen, producing 5 Muppet feature films: The Muppet Movie, The Great Muppet Caper, The Muppets Take Manhattan, The Muppet Christmas Carol, and Muppet Treasure Island, as well as 2 fantasy films, The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. Throughout the 1980s, Henson continued to create memorable television specials and series, including Fraggle Rock, the multi-award-winning animated cartoon Muppet Babies, Jim Henson's Greek Myths, and Jim Henson's The Storyteller, which featured stories based on authentic folk tales. Tragically, Henson's 34-year conquest of children's imaginations ended on May 16, 1990, when he died of complications brought on by an extremely aggressive form of pneumonia. Today, Jim Henson's legacy lives on through the activities of his company. Led by the Henson family, the Jim Henson Company has dedicated itself to continuing the work Jim Henson had so successfully accomplished over the years.
You're listening to Limelight America.
Born in Vermont, Henry Lee wandered the country into his 20s until he finally settled down in Galion, Ohio in 1887. For the next 50 years, he sold everything from kerosene to overalls. His rugged apparel was a big seller out west, but he was tired of waiting for orders to be filled by his eastern suppliers, so Henry became his own manufacturer. The year was 1911. Lee was in his late 60s. By 1916, he had 4 garment manufacturing plants, and in 1927, Lee Jeans made a major breakthrough when the company introduced the first cowboy pants with a zipper. After 21 years as a school teacher, the principal of Robinson, Illinois Elementary was familiar with children's fondness for candy. At age 45, the teacher turned entrepreneur opened a small soda and candy shop where he made a distinctive English toffee treat in the back room. Business was brisk, and by 1931, the ex-teacher had moved to a bigger store where he was eventually forced into mass production to keep up with the demand. Though his 1-ounce toffee bar became world famous, the inventor never suffered the caloric consequences of eating too much of his own product. A small, spry man, he sometimes weighed less than 105 pounds. His name was Lawrence S. Heath. Baseball slugger Babe Ruth is credited for many things beyond his home run records, including inspiring the famous Baby Ruth candy bar. In the early 1900s, a Chicago confectioner and entrepreneur by the name of Otto Schnering created a tasty nickel nut roll bar. He called it Candy Cake, spelled with K's instead of C's. As the chewy treat gained popularity in the 1920s, Schnering decided his candy bar needed a new name. In a company contest, an employee suggested Baby Ruth, but not for the babe of baseball. It was for the popular eldest daughter of President Grover Cleveland. Can you name the 5 wealthiest people in the world? Or the last 3 Heisman Trophy winners? Or 2 Nobel Prize winners? Even though they're the best in their fields, few of us remember the headliners of yesterday. Now, name a teacher who had a positive influence when you were in school, or a friend who helped you through a difficult time. An important part of an entrepreneur's spirit is a willingness to help others, even in small ways that, at the time, don't seem like much. One of my favorite quotes comes from Anita Roddick, the founder of a global cosmetics business called The Body Shop Limited. If you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito. Here on Limelight America, we're going to meet 36 groundbreaking entrepreneurs who fueled the 21st century with their explosion of achievement. It shaped our modern world as we know it today. Radicals and Visionaries reveals the complete stories of both the legendary masters of enterprise and the unsung entrepreneurial heroes. We're going to discover little-known facts, and we'll learn the success secrets of people like A.P. Giannini, the green grocer with no financial experience, who took on the suits and founded the world's largest bank. Ron Popeil, the part-time carnival huckster whose late-night TV commercials for kitchen gadgets kicked off the infomercial phenomenon. From the turn-of-the-century capitalists who ushered in the industrial age to the mass-market moguls who molded pop culture, Radicals and Visionaries is a lively, revealing, and often astonishing chronicle of the lives and accomplishments of some of the most influential entrepreneurs ever known.
Limelight America is produced by the LA Radio Network.